raise your right hand and place your left hand on the Bible. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give the court in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Watch your step. Get you to state your name and spell your last name for the court.
Christopher Allen Dontell. That's Dontell.
I'm going to have you spell your middle name just because there are a couple different ways to spell Allen.
Allen, Allen.
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. Obviously, you are in custody at this time, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
How long have you been in custody?
Since September 9th of 2021.
When were you arrested in this case?
I was arrested November 11th of 2020.
Were you out on bond for a period of time then?
I was out on bond for, I believe, about 10 months.
And what happened to put you back in jail?
The bond got revoked for contact with my co-defendant.
What did you do before you were arrested?
I was a deputy coroner for the Horry County Coroner's Office.
Did you have any other jobs or businesses?
I did. I owned a totally unrelated business in facility maintenance with a business partner in Maryland.
Now, was your case called for trial in December of last year?
Yes, ma'am.
What happened when it was called for trial?
When it was called for trial, I pled to accessory after the fact and conspiracy.
Had you had any conversations with me or any other representative of the state about that plea before you stood up and said that?
No.
Do you have any agreements whatsoever with the state that's causing you to testify today?
No.
Did you plead guilty to those charges because you are in fact guilty of those charges?
Yes.
What are you hoping to get from testifying today if there are no agreements between the state and you?
Personally, I'm hoping to get obviously less time. I'm also hoping to provide closure for the Rice family.
I'm going to sort of jump around just a little bit because I'm going to go to after the murder, before the murder. Were you interviewed multiple times by law enforcement prior to your arrest?
Yes.
Did you tell the truth during those interviews?
No.
Why?
A few reasons. One, I was still trying to protect my job. I had a family, a house, I had a career, I had a good life, and I'm trying to protect it. I'd also been threatened by my co-defendant that if I ever told the truth, she'd kill me.
You said one of the reasons is that you were trying to protect the house. You had a nice house and a family. Does your family still live in that house?
No.
And some people might think it odd that a man is afraid of a fairly petite woman. Why were you afraid of her?
I was afraid of her because I watched her kill the father of her kid. And threatened to do the same thing to me.
All right. So now, how did you come to meet the defendant?
So, I believe it was early 2018. She came to work for Grindstaff Transport, which is the company that contracts with the coroner's office as well as several funeral homes in the area to do body transport. I had worked for them for several years at that time, and when the defendant came to work for Grind staff, I was one of the ones that was kind of put in charge of helping to train her. So I taught her things like, different funeral homes have different preferences for how you speak to the families and the questions you ask, and things that you do to the body when you get back to the funeral home to prepare it for embalming. So I trained her as to the preferences of all those different funeral homes, as well as the preferences of the coroners, so that we could serve our customers the best we could.
You sort of explained it, but what does a body transport company do?
Okay, so the body transport company, in the case of a funeral home, say a funeral home calls, we would go to the place of death, meet with the family, ask several questions that are repetitive. You ask the same questions with each body. And then bring the body from the place of death to the funeral home and prepare it for embalming or cremation, depending on the circumstances. And in the case of a coroner call, we would respond to the place of death, and that could be anywhere from a hospital bed to the side of the road, anywhere in between. And we would work with the coroners while on scene, just to make their job as easy as possible. We would draw blood if they needed us to draw blood. We would help collect bodily fluids. We would help package evidence, really whatever they needed.
Would body transport workers work alone or in pairs?
Both, depending on the circumstances. On a coroner case, typically it would be alone, because usually on a coroner case there's firemen or police on scene that would help us with the bodies. In the case of a funeral home, most of the time 2 people would go, because the family's there and you want to make sure you're handling the body with care and respect.
Did you ever see the defendant lifting a body?
Thousands of times, yes.
Did she always require assistance?
No.
You said that you met her, I believe you said sometime in 2018. When you first began working with her, did you introduce her to your family?
I wouldn't say it was when I first went to work with her, but I believe the first time she met my family was when we were living in a condo off of 38th Avenue in Myrtle Beach, and my wife was pregnant at the time, and we were moving into our new house in Conway, so I was having to box things up and lift the weight on my own because my wife couldn't lift because she was pregnant. And I just happened to be talking about it on one of our death calls one day that, I had a lot of work to get done. I was having to box things up. I didn't have much help. And the defendant volunteered to help me lift the boxes and move them downstairs and things like that. So I took her up on that offer, and she came to the condo and helped, and she met my wife.
Do you know where the defendant was living at that point?
She was living in Merle's Inlet.
Who was she living with?
The victim in the case and her 4 children.
The victim being Greg Rice?
Greg Rice, yeah, sorry.
When you moved from the condo, where did you and your family move?
We moved to River's Edge Plantation off of Highway 90 in Conway.
At some point, did you and the defendant begin a sexual relationship?
Yes.
How did that begin?
Well, it began, I would say, when there was a time I invited her to lunch at a restaurant called Bricks in Myrtle Beach. She came to lunch with me, and she ordered several drinks. It was the first time I'd seen her drink. She ordered a bunch of amaretto sours and got hammered drunk. After that, and let me backtrack, I was a regular at Bricks. I went there a lot. I went there with my family. I went there after leaving the hospital from autopsies for lunch. I was a regular there. So after the initial time that the defendant met me there, I continued to go there on my own, and I started seeing her there. I would run into her there. She would already be there, and she would typically be drinking by herself. And she started becoming a regular there herself, more so than I was.
This was before your sexual relationship began?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm getting
No,
next.
no, you're fine. I'm just trying to make sure we keep the timeline correct.
I got you. So then on one of these occasions at Bricks, it was at night, she paid her bill and she told me that she had to talk to me outside privately. So I went outside with her and she told me to get in the van, her work van. So I got in the passenger seat thinking she was going to ask me a question about work or something like that. And she turned the van on and threw it in reverse. I said, "Where are we going?" She said, "We can't talk right here." It was right by the entrance and there were people around. So in the back parking lot of Bricks, it's kind of an incline in the parking lot and it goes up to a service road, like a dead end service road. And she pulled into the service road and parked. And I said, "This looks suspicious, why are we here?" She said, "Have you ever cheated on your wife?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, you're about to." Then she climbed over the console on top of me and started to kiss me. And on that occasion, I gently pushed her off of me and said, "I'm not doing this." For the next several days, she kind of made fun of me about it and told me that I was the only guy she's ever met that would have turned down that opportunity. And eventually I didn't push her off of me. I gave in, and that's when it all started. And it became a regular event.
Do you know about when the affair started?
It would have been very late 2019, very early 2020.
Would you say that the two of you were fairly sexually active with each other? Did you have sex a lot?
I don't know. Depends on what your definition of a lot is, but yeah, fairly regularly, yeah.
During your time together with the defendant, before the affair started and all the way until you stopped having contact with her, did you ever meet Greg Rice?
No.
Did the defendant ever talk to you about her relationship with Greg Rice?
Yes.
How did she describe her relationship with Greg Rice?
She described it as abusive. Basically that he was a drug abusing woman beater, and that was why she left him.
During your time with her, did you ever see any physical evidence of any abuse that she suffered?
No.
Did you, other than what the defendant said to you, did you have any other reason to believe that Greg Rice had anything to do with illegal drugs?
No.
At some point, did the defendant move into your neighborhood?
Yes.
What?
Go back to my point. That's a leading question, in my opinion. Objective. Go ahead.
Do you know when that was?
She moved into the neighborhood around Christmas time of 2019. I remember that because she had a Christmas tree in her house before she had anything else.
Once she moved into the neighborhood, did you and your family begin to spend time with her and her children?
Yes.
Okay, let me actually back up. Who moved into her house? Excuse me.
In River's Edge,
Yes.
she had left Greg, and she moved into the new house with her 4 children.
Approximately how far away was the house that she moved into from your house?
Right down the street, within a 2-minute walk, roughly.
And I think I might have just asked this, but did your family started spending time with each other?
All the time.
Did you ever have an opportunity to speak to the children about their father, Greg Rice?
Yeah, I mean,
I object to what Greg Rice might have said. That's hearsay.
Yeah, you can't get into what he said without allowing that question.
Okay,
I mean, you can't say what Greg Rice said.
I didn't ask what Greg Rice said. I was asking about the children, but I can ask it this way. In your time with the victim's children, did you see anything that would indicate that the children were afraid of him?
just the opposite.
Okay.
No, they spoke very high. They spoke of him the way I would want my children to speak of me.
I object, Your Honor. He's talking about what other people said. That's hearsay. Hearsay. What the children said, hearsay.
At some point, did Erica, your wife, find out that you and the defendant were having an affair?
Yes.
And let me ask the obvious question first. Before she found out, did you take steps to hide the affair from her?
Yes.
Did that include lying to her?
Yes.
So at some point, Erica found out about the affair. Do you know how she found out?
I believe it was when she received anonymous text messages.
Were you together with her when she got those text messages?
I believe so, yes. Yeah.
Did she?
Object, Your Honor, that's not an affirmative answer. He said it was pretty certain. Object the question and answer.
I can
What
clarify.
I want me to do is strike it.
Just have him rephrase it or check on him, see if he is testifying to what he knows. Can't testify, I'm not sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. I forgot where I was now. Did she show you any of those? Did she confront you about those text messages?
Yes, she did.
What was your response to her about the text? Do you remember what any of them said?
It was something to the effect of, your husband has impregnated someone. Just thought you might want to know about it.
What did you say when she confronted you with those text messages?
That I had no idea who would have sent that, and that it wasn't true.
So you lied to her because you were trying to cover up your affair?
Yeah.
At that time, did you have any idea who sent those messages?
No.
Did you and or your wife ever, well, I'll stick with you just so it's personal knowledge. Did you ever speak with the defendant about those texts?
Yes.
Did the defendant ever tell you who was sending the text or who she thought was sending the text?
She pretty much immediately said that it was Greg Rice.
And I apologize if I've asked you this before. Did you ever meet Greg?
No, my as far as I never shook his hand. We never spoke. I saw him. He would drive through the neighborhood to pick up the kids. I would wave at him, just a friendly wave. That was the extent of my interaction with him.
After those initial texts, did you and your wife remain married?
I'm sorry.
After Erica received those initial texts, that's a hard word, did you guys remain married?
Yes.
Did it cause additional strain on your marriage?
Yes.
Court's indulgence for a moment. I'm not saying you would commit at this time. Just gonna show. Your Honor, I'm going to approach, with the court's permission, with State's Exhibit 153. Did you and the defendant have more than one conversation about who might be kind of trying to leak word of the affair?
Yeah, it was an ongoing conversation over the course of several days. You know,
And were they in-person conversations, text conversations, or both?
both.
If you could just look at Exhibit 153, it's not admitted yet, so don't read it out loud or anything.
Okay.
But is that a text conversation that you had with the defendant?
It appears to be, yes. I mean, it's been 5 years, so I don't remember exactly, you know.
Right.
But
Is that your phone number that's in
it is my phone number, yes.
And is that her phone number?
Yes.
Did anyone else ever text from your phone?
Not to my knowledge.
And to your knowledge, did anyone ever text from the defendant's phone? Text you from the defendant's phone?
Other than her, no.
Next.
Your Honor, I don't believe you can know who texted her phone, so I'm going to strike that in.
He said not to my knowledge.
Overruled, I will allow.
Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit here. Before your wife got those anonymous text messages, had you and the defendant and one of her daughters and a friend gone to Florida together?
Yes.
Okay, just tell us a little bit about that.
So the conversation began with I was going to go to Florida to two things. The Jacksonville area to look at some convenience stores. There was a contract that I got with my maintenance company every year to pressure wash lots of convenience stores up and down the East Coast. And the client that we worked for had numerous stores in Florida that I had never had the chance to bid. And I had been wanting to go there for a long time to drop a business card to some of the franchisees at the stores and try to get my foot in the door to get the Florida region of the contracts. There's also a really good pizza place in St. Augustine that I like to go to. And I discussed all this with the defendant.
So how is it that you and the defendant and these two other people went together?
Yeah, she said, well, I'll pay for the whole trip. And she booked the trip and we went together and I didn't resist.
Did you tell Erica that you were going with the defendant and the defendant's daughter and her friend?
No, she knew I was going to Florida, but not with them.
Again, I'm not admitting it.
That's what we mentioned.
It's mentioned. So I'm approaching with State's Exhibit 98. And I'm just going to direct your attention to, I think it's the 6th line. Is that an accurate list of the people who went to Florida on that trip?
Yes.
To your knowledge, did anyone else know who all went on that trip?
No, not to my knowledge.
While you were, and how close in time was that trip to when Greg was killed?
I don't remember the exact dates of the trip. I know Greg was killed on the night of the 2nd. It would have been within a week to 2 weeks, I believe.
During that trip, did the defendant tell you anything about any text conversations or issues she was having with the victim?
Yes. So during that trip, she claimed that Greg Rice was upset because she had let the kids with him for longer than he expected to have them. And then she showed me what appeared to be a text from Greg saying something to the effect of, "You have a storm coming."
Did she show you just that text message, or did she show you like an entire conversation?
She did not show me the entire conversation. Matter of fact, that's the only line I remember.
Did the defendant talk to you about that sort of message?
Well, going forward from that point, she acted as if she was terrified of Greg, and that if that storm coming message meant that he was going to abuse her again. She was in fear of him, and it was a constant subject of conversation after that. I don't know how she did it. She's very tech savvy, and she did something with her phone to where she could see Greg's phone screen on her phone, and she could track his location. She could see if he was texting somebody, she could see his screen on her screen from wherever she was. Like I said, it was a constant conversation. She thought that he was going to use the kids against her. She claimed that he had made comments about trying to take the kids and get child support from her. And like I said, it was a constant conversation after she got that text.
Again, I apologize, I'm jumping around a little bit. At some point, did the defendant tell you that she had become pregnant?
Yes.
Was that before or after the trip to Florida?
Before. That would have been in, I believe it was late August.
Did she tell you who the father of the child was?
She said that the father of the child was me.
At some point during this time period when the anonymous text messages were being sent, was there ever any conversation about a package coming in the mail?
Yes. One of the anonymous texts that my wife received said that something along the lines of all the proof is in the mail, or all the proof, all these messages will be sent in paper form, something like that, in the mail.
And so what conversations did you and the defendant have about this potential package?
I don't remember exact conversations we had about it, but I can tell you when it came, I was home and I received it.
Who was the package addressed to?
It was addressed to my wife.
Was there a return address on it?
There was. It was from an education company in Columbia.
What made you think that that was the package that would be related to the anonymous text?
Because the company that was listed, or the school that was listed as the sender, was not the school that my wife worked for. It was a different one. And combine that with the fact that supposedly this stuff was coming in the mail, I put two and two together, and I opened the package, and
What did you see inside?
I saw several pages of what appeared to be screenshots of text messages as well as photo collages. And to be honest with you, I didn't even examine it. I knew what it was, and I got in my car and drove it down to the defendant's house and gave it to her.
Did you have any idea what she was going to do with that package?
I did not.
But you said you saw photo. What did you see inside the box?
Photo collages. Some of the pages had screenshots of text messages. Some of them had photo collages. I mean, I noticed that there were some pictures I recognized of myself on there, but I didn't analyze each page or look at all the pictures.
Okay. Now let's move to October 2nd.
Okay.
Starting at about 6:15, the jury has seen evidence that you and the defendant left River's Edge in separate cars around 6:15, 6:20.
That's testimony from the solicitor.
I'm just trying to orient him into. So
I sustain the objection. Just ask your question.
at some point that evening, did you and the defendant leave River's Edge community at about the same time?
I don't believe so. I believe I was already out working,
Court's indulgence.
and when I met with her, if I recall correctly, it was at the Heritage Wildlife Preserve.
Court's indulgence. What type of car did you typically drive?
A silver Ford Explorer.
Was that a county car?
Yes.
What type of car did the defendant typically drive?
Typically I believe it was silver, Honda Odyssey minivan.
I'm approaching you with admitted exhibits 136 and 138. So let's start with 136. Do you recognize both the car and the driver in that photo?
Yes, that's the defendant driving her work van.
Okay. And what's the date and time stamp on that?
October 2nd, 6:16 p.m.
Okay, now look at 138. Do you recognize that car?
Yeah, that appears to be me entering the gate at October 2nd at 6:20 p.m. Okay.
And you said entering. Is that you entering the community or leaving?
Yeah, I believe we're both entering in that picture. I'm not sure though. No.
And if you don't know, that's fine.
I don't know.
Okay. Shortly after this time, did you two go to, and I'm just calling it the Preserve because the name's too long, the Preserve on International Drive?
We did, yes.
What was the purpose of going there?
Shooting,
Had you done that before?
yes, many times.
Did you, when you would go shooting, who was shooting? Was it you, was it her, or was it a combination?
If I might backtrack a little bit,
Absolutely.
prior to all of this, I would say total throughout the duration of time that, from the time I met the defendant until all of this transpired, we probably went shooting 12 to 15 times. Sometimes it was at the Heritage Preserve, sometimes it was in the woods off of Water Tower Road. I know she shot more frequently than I did, but she often asked me to go with her, and sometimes I did. Sometimes I went and didn't shoot, and she shot. Sometimes I did shoot.
So, speaking directly to the night of October 2nd, who shot that night?
The defendant.
Do you know what kind of gun she used?
I don't know the kind of gun. I know it was a small black gun. I don't know the brand or anything.
How long, you can estimate, and if you can't, that's fine. How long were you in the Preserve that night?
Not long. So I had worked all day that day. I went on call for the coroner's office at 8 o'clock that morning. I got my first call pretty much right away, and I stayed busy all day. I hadn't eaten much, and I wanted to go to get some dinner. That was my priority. So when we shot, we weren't there more than 10 to 15 minutes. I remember it being muddy, and all I could think about was eating. So we didn't stay long.
So did you guys in fact go to eat after that?
We did, yes.
Where did you go?
Abuelos.
How long were you at Abuelos for? You can estimate or not if you don't know.
I would only be estimating an hour maybe.
Okay. What did you do after Abuelos?
So, well, while we were at Abuelos, I remembered that a friend of my family who works at a different restaurant, it was her last weekend working there, and I mentioned to the defendant that we should have gone there in Socastee. So we decided that when we left Abuelos, we would stop by there to see her on her last shift. So we left Abuelos and headed for the restaurant in Socastee. When we got there, there was a line out the door, there was nowhere to park, so we ended up not even going there. So we continued on down the road to another friend of ours' residence. He lived on a houseboat in the Osprey Marina. So we headed toward the Osprey Marina.
Did you end up going to that friend's house?
We did not. So backtracking again, I'm sorry. The defendant was acting unusual all day that day. Starting early in the day, she was unavailable for my death calls, which was very unusual because normally when I'm on call, she's right behind me. She followed me around the county, and she would respond to my calls whether I needed her there or not. So it was unusual that she wasn't available part of the day. And then she was very quiet. Even at Abuelos, she was reserved and something was off. So then while we're driving, when we got to the Osprey Marina, I was turning in and she said, "Just keep driving. I don't want to see Charles, who's our friend. I don't feel like dealing with people. Just keep driving."
So what did you guys do?
So we continued driving. I remember we drove down Enterprise Road to Bay Road and looped back around to 707.
Was anything going on between the two of you during that ride?
Not that I recall in particular, but
Okay.
we, at some point I remember I realized that I didn't have any of my supplies that I needed for work. I had a little blue bag that I carried with me that had all the paperwork I needed. It had my gloves. It had things I would need if I were to get a death call, and I had left it in my Explorer at Abuelos.
So what did you do when
So
you
we
left?
went, at some point we went back to get the bag out of my Explorer in case I got a death call, so I would be able to do what I needed to do.
Can I infer then that you and the defendant were driving in her van when you...
We were, yeah, we left my Explorer at Abuelos, and I was driving her van.
What happened after you went back to Abuelos to pick up your bag?
She said that she needed to stop by at Myrtle Beach Funeral Home because she had left her glasses there earlier that day.
Was this after typical business hours at a funeral home?
It was late. It was dark, so it had to have been 9 o'clock or so.
How would you guys have gotten into the Myrtle Beach funeral home? If it's after hours.
With the key.
Who had a key?
The defendant definitely had one. I may have also had one. I had keys to some funeral homes, but not others. So we had at least one key with us, maybe two.
Okay. So the defendant says she has to get glasses. Did you, in fact, go to the funeral home?
We did.
Tell me about that. What happened?
So we went to the funeral home, and I assumed she was looking for her glasses. She went to the left. We walked in the back door of the building. She walked to the left, which is back toward where the embalming room is. I went straight up the hall toward the office. At some point, I heard her speaking, presumably on the phone. And then I heard the conversation end. She came to the office. When she got to the office, she had her cell phone out. And I was talking to her, and she wasn't looking up at me. Whatever was on her phone, she was very, had her attention. And she said, I have to go see Greg.
Did she say why she had to go see Greg?
She did not, but I said, well, I'm not going.
Why not? Why wouldn't you go?
Because she was constantly complaining about drama and abuse, and I didn't want to be part of it. She would typically take a friend with her. Her friend Savannah would go with her to Greg's house, or she would go on her own.
Is that based on what she told you, or did you actually witness her?
Based on what she told me.
Okay. So what
I didn't want to be caught up in drama.
What happened when you told her you weren't going to go?
She said she would just be a few minutes, just go with her.
What happened next?
So I drove her van. We drove toward Greg's apartment complex, which is off of Arrowhead Road.
Let me stop you there for a second. Did you know where Greg lived before this?
I knew where his apartment complex was. I had been there on death calls before, so I knew roughly, I forget what it was called now, but I knew how to get to the general area.
Did you ever require directions to get there?
No.
What? So I'm sorry. Now continue. You headed in the direction of the victim.
We headed in the direction. She called Greg while we were driving, and I guess he had indicated to her that he was outside. She told me that she makes him meet her outside because she's uncomfortable going to his apartment. So he meets her outside of the apartment complex. So we were driving down Arrowhead Road, and I saw Greg on the left side of the road walking towards us, just outside of the apartment complex. And I said, is that him? She said, yeah. So as we approached him, I started to slow down, and she said, make a U-turn. So I kind of passed him, made a U-turn, and as I pulled up alongside him, she said, because he stopped walking, and he kind of turned to face our van, and I was stopping right next to him, and she said, pull up, don't be awkward. So I said, pull up. She said, yeah, pull up. So I pulled up so that we had passed him.
What happened next?
She opened the door and shot him.
How many shots did you hear?
A lot.
What did you do?
I froze.
Did the defendant say anything to you at that point?
Yeah. She said, what are you doing? Help me, help me. Cursing at me, help me.
So what did you do?
I got out of the van and walked toward the back of the van. Greg was laying right at the back of the van on the side of the road.
What did you do?
She said, put him in the back of the van. So I opened the back of the van, and we started treating him just as we would treat any other body. And I grabbed the sheet, wrapped it up like a rope, put it underneath his torso to help with leverage. And then in her van, she had what we call I don't remember what we called it, like a sliding board. It was a black plastic backboard, and it was flexible so that you could put a body on it and easily slide it and maneuver it around. I pulled that off of her stretcher, and using the sheet as leverage, we both picked Greg up and put him on the sliding board and put him into the back of the van.
What did you do next?
I reached in and started buckling him. So on the mortuary stretchers that we had put him on, there's 2 seat belts, and you click them, and what they do is they hold the body in place. And I started to do that, and she started screaming and cussing at me and said, you know, "What are you doing? We need to get out of here. We need to get out of here." And I shut the back door. Greg was just kind of haphazardly on the stretcher. He wasn't buckled on. He wasn't covered up. And we got in the van, and I hightailed it out of there.
How long would you say you were in the Arrowhead community?
Not long. I mean, it happened fast. And by the time, when I pulled up in front of him, it was like one swift move. Like she opened the door, slid out, and it was pop, 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 pop.
Had the 2 of you moved bodies before together? You just have to say yes or no.
Yes.
Was, I mean, as part of your jobs, was that a fairly frequent occurrence?
Yes, every day.
So you said that you hightailed it out of the Arrowhead community. Where did you go?
We went back to the funeral home.
What happened when you got there?
Well, first of all, on the way there, I asked her, "What just happened? Why did you do that?" And she didn't say much. She told me to go to the funeral home. And I just remember the complete nonchalance. Just like this, it was like a minor inconvenience that we were going through.
So what happened once you got back to the funeral home?
So at the funeral home, when you bring a body in, they have a garage and they have coolers in the garage, and the coolers have one door that you open, and there's either 3 or 4 shelves inside the door. And wheeled Greg in on stretcher. I made a cremation container, which is pretty much a glorified cardboard box. And you use little zip ties to tie it up and make it rigid. And I made one just like we would make for anybody else. And I put it into the cooler and pushed the stretcher up next to it and started to push Greg in. And the whole time she was yelling, "Are you stupid? Are you stupid? Hurry up. We got to get out of here. Hurry up. Are you stupid?" Over and over again. "Are you stupid?"
Did you have any concerns about leaving the victim in a cooler and leaving the funeral home? So sometimes the coroner's office will use funeral homes as extra storage, like if we're out of room at the morgue in Conway, or if it's, for whatever reason, we might need to leave a body in a funeral home. And typically we put a note on the shelf that the body's on. It just says "Hold for Coroner," and that's what I did. I put a note on it that said "Hold for Coroner." Would that have been unusual? A note, "Hold for Coroner"?
No, that was a regular thing.
During this time that you're taking Greg out of the van and loading him into the cooler, were you able to see him? Was there a lot of blood?
So the night that The night that we put him in,
Yes, the night he was killed.
I did not look. I had draped a sheet across him when we brought him in from the van, and I just pushed him in like he was. Now, the next night, I saw him.
Okay,
And there
I'll
was-
get to that in just a minute.
Okay.
So after you put Greg in the cooler, what did you guys do?
Got out of there fast and went back to her house.
Did you go back to?
I'm sorry.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
On the way back to her house, we had to get my Explorer from Abuelo's. So we stopped to get my Explorer before we went back to her house. On the way to get the Explorer, she told me that if I ever told anybody what happened, she would kill me. And that we had to be in this together. She told me that I have to stay with her that night. I better not leave her. And then we went, got my Explorer. We went to Lowe's food store, International Drive, and I can't remember which vehicle we left there, but we left one of the vehicles in the parking lot of the Lowe's food store. And
So
took
your
the other
Explorer
two.
was still at Abuelo's, but you went and picked it up and went to Lowe's. I'm just trying to get that.
Correct, yes.
Where did you go after that?
We went to Megan's house.
Okay. So at some point, did you go back to the funeral home that night?
We did.
Why?
So I got to backtrack and tell you background. When we got back to her house, her daughter, Savannah, was watching TV in the living room. And I just remember thinking how normal it looked in the house, and I had to pretend that this hadn't just happened. Sorry. Megan went straight to the shower, and I sat on the couch with Savannah. I'm sorry, Savannah.
Okay, you just have to answer my
I'm
questions.
sorry. Sat on the couch with her. And I tried to make small talk. Like I hadn't just watched her mother kill her father. I'm sorry, what was the question?
You said you would return to the funeral home at some point that night. So you got back to Megan's house, she's upstairs taking a shower, you're on the couch with Savannah, what happened next?
Okay, so there's an app that we use for the coroner's office called Iris.
Is that
And
I-R-I-S?
I believe it's IRISS.
Okay, thank you. So there's an app, what?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So the Iris app, it tells you what's going on in the county. Only law enforcement, fire, rescue, coroners have access to it. And I remember seeing on that app that there was what appeared to be a pending death on the south end of town. It said it was a cardiac arrest. The call came into the cardiac arrest. I believe it was a man that was found down in his driveway. And I told the defendant after she got out of the shower about that call. I said, it looks like there's going to be a death call, and I can't not go on it. I can't act like something is out of the ordinary. And she said that she wanted to go back to the funeral home anyway because she forgot to get Greg's belongings off of his body.
Did she ever say why she wanted to get his belongings?
I don't know that she specifically said why.
Okay. Did you then go back to the funeral home?
We did.
What happened when you got there?
When we got there, I parked out back. I did not go in at first. It's very late at night at this point. It's got to be probably after midnight. And I parked out back. I stayed in the car. The defendant went into the building. And right after she went in the building, two older people, an older couple, walked around from the side of the building around back. And I had never seen them before. And they were walking toward the door of the building. And I thought it was unusual that they were going into the back door of the funeral home at 12:30 at night. So I asked them, I rolled down the window, I said, can I help you? And they weren't very friendly. They just said, we're here to work. So with everything that was going on this evening, everything in the world just wasn't adding up to me. So I got out of the Explorer and went into the funeral home. I walked back to the left and because I saw the light was on in the embalming room, and they were in there. The older couple was in there, and they told me that they were trade embalmers and that they were there to embalm the body. I still thought it was odd that I had never seen them before, but there was a deceased woman on the table, and they appeared to be embalmers, so I made small talk with them for a minute, and I left. I walked back out to the main hallway to go back outside. At that point, the defendant was walking down the hallway like she had come from the front of the building.
How long would you say the defendant was in the funeral home before the trade embalmers went in?
Not long at all. Maybe less than a minute, probably.
When she came walking up, did you ever see what she had taken from Greg's body?
Yeah, I saw keys and I forget what else, but she had some of his personal effects.
Did she ever tell you what she did with that stuff?
Yeah, so the next morning, I'm still on call. I'm on call all throughout this weekend. The next morning, I had death calls in the morning. She went on, I believe, the first death call I had. She actually did the transport for it. And then she said she was going to be unavailable because she had to make things seem normal for the kids, and she was supposed to take them to Greg's apartment that morning.
So what did she do with the belongings?
So, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I wasn't there, but she told me that she took the kids and Greg's belongings to his apartment, and that she hid his keys and his wallet in a cushion on his front porch and then let the kids find them for some reason. So she hid the belongings that she took off his body on his outdoor furniture, let the kids find them. She also told me that while she was there, She went back out to the road in front of the complex and picked up shell casings that were in the road that had been left there the night before. And this was in broad daylight.
So this is now October 3rd?
Yeah, the morning of the 3rd.
Okay. Did you and the defendant have any conversations about what to do with Greg's body?
Yeah, so I believe what happened that morning after she took the kids to Greg's apartment was she went to her boss's house and dropped them off there because Greg was.
I check what he believes.
That's the standard. If he knows, he knows. If he doesn't,
Okay, the defendant told me that she dropped the kids off with her boss, Chuck Benjamin, at which point she became available for death calls because she didn't have the kids anymore. I had a death call on Treetop Court off of Bay Road, and the defendant came and did that transport for me. So I went inside and I talked with the next of kin of the deceased. The defendant came in. We did our normal job preparing the body for transport. Got the body onto the stretcher together, at which point the defendant took the stretcher to her van, and I went to my Explorer to do the paperwork that goes along with the body to the funeral home. While I was doing the paperwork, the defendant got in the passenger seat of my Explorer. And she told me that I have to get rid of the body.
What did you say?
I said no. I told her that she should ask Jim to cremate the body. Jim was the owner of the funeral home. I told her she should ask Chuck to help her, that I was already way more involved than I wanted to be. And she told me, this isn't about Jim, this isn't about Chuck, this is about you, and I saved your life. This is the least you could do for me.
So did you agree to dispose of Greg's body?
Not at first. It was an ongoing debate all day. With me refusing to do it, and then her telling me that if that body gets found at the funeral home, she's going to kill me. And I'll tell you, I'd known Meagan for a while at that point, and she talked like that all the time. She talked like, you know, I'm going to kill this person or that person, you know. I want to kill my kids. I want to gouge so-and-so's eyes out.
It's not responsive to the question.
Keep going.
I'm going to gouge so-and-so's eyes out. But prior to all this happening, I never took that seriously. But on the night of the 2nd, that changed. And you know, when I heard her say, you know, do this or do that, or I'm going to kill you. I had just watched her kill the father of her kids, and I'm going to take it serious.
So did you, in fact, dispose of Greg's body?
I did. So I went to Lowe's, and I honestly, at the time, had no idea what I was going to do with the body or if I was even going to do what she wanted me to do. I didn't want to do it, and when I was there shopping at Lowe's, I didn't know where I was taking him. I didn't know if I was going to go to the water or to the woods or somewhere else. And I just started buying things that I thought might be useful. And it makes me sick to even tell this story. I'm sorry.
Well, at some point, you go back to the funeral home to get Greg's body?
Yes. So, and if I can fill in a little bit again, I bought the items at Lowe's. Later on in the day, we had a death call in Aner. The defendant was available for it. While we were on the death call, she told me that she was having a miscarriage, actively. And that particular body was going to be stored at the coroner's office at the morgue there. So we left the house where the person died and we took them back to the coroner's office. And the defendant got out of her van and walked straight into the bathroom of the coroner's office and was in there for, I estimate, 20 to 30 minutes. I handled the body, I took care of what needed to be done. Eventually she came out of the bathroom and she told me, again, so nonchalantly, well, I'm having a miscarriage, so things are really working out for you. Greg's dead and I'm having a miscarriage. And she told me that I better get rid of that body tonight. Meaning Greg's body.
So at some point, did you go back to the funeral home to get Greg's body?
Yeah, I waited till it was dark. I went back by myself. She had told me to get him out of the county. So I went to the funeral home and I took my Explorer and I put him in my Explorer.
What did you transport him in?
So I had grabbed a portable stretcher. I believe I got it out of her van. It was either out of the van or it was out of the funeral home itself. But they have these fold-up stretchers. They fold out and they look like a big, heavy-duty backboard. I took him out of the cooler. I put him on that.
Was there anything covering the stretcher before you put Greg's body on top?
There was. I unfolded the tarp that I had purchased and put it on the
Okay. What did you do
stretcher.
next?
I pulled Greg out using the sheets that were still around him from the previous night, and I pulled him over onto the tarp. And at this point, I looked at him because it all seemed so real, so surreal. I just had to see his face and believe it was him.
Well, let me stop you there for a second. Obviously, you saw deceased people on a regular basis. Were you able to tell at that point whether Greg was alive or dead?
He was dead. I knew he was dead. He was dead within a couple seconds of first shooting him.
Okay. So, what did you do after you put him on the stretcher that the tarp is covering?
I strapped him on using the seatbelts on the stretcher, and I took him out to the Explorer and put him in the Explorer. And at this point, I still didn't know where I was going. So I sat behind the funeral home for a few minutes, and I thought about going to Myrtle's Inlet. And there's a lot of water down there. And then I decided, I don't even remember my train of thought, but I decided to take him out 501. I knew that the PD River was out on the county line. And I started heading in that direction. So while I was on 501, I just didn't want to be doing this. And all I could think about was, how can I get out of this? I felt like there was no good decision I could make. I called the police. She's going to kill me. Pulled over into a parking lot, and I sat there for a few minutes. It was just a business. It was late at night, so it was an empty parking lot. Just trying to think of how can I get out of this. And eventually I came to the realization that I wasn't getting out of it, and I just had to finish what I was doing. So I looked at the map on my phone at the river at the county line, and I decided to head out 378. So I drove out 378, and there wasn't much traffic, but as I got close to the county line, there was a car that had flown up behind me, and I pulled into a little convenience store about a mile or so before the county line, and I let that car pass. And then I continued out toward the river. When I got there, I actually drove across the bridge, and after you cross the bridge into Marion County, there's a sharp bend, I believe, to the right in the road. After that bend, you can see ahead for a long ways. And I made sure that there was no oncoming cars, so that nobody was going to pull up on me while I was doing what I was doing. And once I knew there were no cars coming, I did a U-turn. I went back to the middle of the bridge, and I popped the back gate of the Explorer. It took about 10 seconds to put them in the water.
What did you do after that?
Went back to the defendant's house.
Was there any conversation at that point about getting rid of, had you done that?
I came in, and she smiled at me and said, "Did you do what you needed to do? What you needed to do?" I said, "Yes," and she said, "Good boy."
Let me just back up on something. Do you know what happened to the gun the defendant used? Did she ever tell you what she did?
She
with it?
told me that she put it in the intercoastal waterway off of International Drive, along with shell casings and I believe some of his other personal effects.
Okay. At some point, did the two of you kind of strategize about what to tell the police if they ever questioned you?
Yeah. So I got a call from Greg Lent with Horry County Police asking me to come in to talk about Greg Rice's disappearance. At this point, he hadn't been found. So I told the defendant that I got that call, at which point she started drumming up this whole story about what we were going to tell him. And that's what we went with, and it was not true at all.
Is that the story you repeated to the police
Yes.
time and time again before your arrest?
Yes, I felt like I had no choice.
At some point, did you decide to tell the truth about what happened?
I did.
And what spurred that decision? What made you decide to tell the truth?
Well, the first conversation I had with my lawyer, I told her what I was guilty of, and I said, I will plead to that now and I'll tell the whole truth. But I want my family to be protected, because as soon as it came out that I was talking and actually telling the truth and not the story. I didn't know what she would do. She would hurt my family. So, back in December, my lawyer arranged for, I guess they came to an agreement with the county that they would put some type of GPS radius around my family. And my understanding of it was that if the defendant, who was on home detention at the time with an ankle monitor, were to enter into these areas anywhere near my family, the police would be dispatched immediately. That was the point where I was somewhat comfortable telling the truth.
So did you meet with Ms. Waller and investigators at J. Reuben Law?
Yes.
At the beginning of that meeting, did you tell the entire truth?
At the beginning of the meeting.
Did you come in with a written statement? And I'll actually...
I did. Well, yeah, I came in with a written statement. When I wrote the statement, I didn't tell the whole truth. That was prior to my conversation with my lawyer about the GPS radius and protecting my family. So yes, I came with that statement, but during that meeting, the safety arrangement was made, at which point I told the entire truth.
Court's indulgence for a moment. Your Honor, may I approach? And this is previously admitted, State's Exhibit 158. All right, so this is an aerial view of the Arrowhead complex with the Flint Lake Apartments right in here.
Okay.
I'll hold it closer to you because I know you can't lift your arms. Can you show us where?
So this is Arrowhead right here?
Yeah, that's Arrowhead.
Okay.
And this would be, I think that's the
Clay Pond?
Yeah, that's the Clay Pond entrance.
Okay.
So can you tell us, if that's Flint Lake, where along this road
Yeah.
the defendant,
So he
the
would
victim was shot?
He would come out and get it right.
Here, I'm just, sorry, I'm gonna hold it up like,
Yeah.
Tommy, can you just not block the view of the jury? Sure. Thanks.
It would have been somewhere in the vicinity of where this new, it looks like a new construction road is on one side, and then looks like there's a fairway for a golf course on the other side of the road, straight across from the construction.
Okay, so I wanna make sure and then I'll show the jury. This area right here where this construction is?
Correct. Generally right in that vicinity.
Did you see that, Tommy?
Yeah.
Okay. Right for the construction. Court's indulgence for a moment, please. I don't have any further questions at this time. I believe Mr. Tommy Burton may have some questions for you.